Hey, folks out there in Wonderland and TV Land and the box right there on the Twitch, everyone out the Wonder Sphere, we are the nerds that know.
Huzzah!
Huzzah!
What is this, a Renaissance festival?
Yeah.
I mean, it felt right.
We are your favorite assholes that talk about everything and anything. We are here on location in Southwest Plaza in lovely Littleton, Colorado, where Western Command is located. And we have the Goons here. We also have Tank here and a special guest because we are at a wonderful place called You Deserve Art. And it is a wonderful place that just moved here a couple months ago. These guys are doing an awesome job here. And we have a special guest with us as well, who we definitely are going to spend the majority of the time talking to, Mr. Monty Moore.
What's up, y'all?
Who is an
Welcome,
artist
Monty.
extraordinaire who covers a lot of things. And we're very excited about this. So we really hope you guys enjoy this kind of fun for the holidays. So, Matt, take it away.
Gee, thanks, Mark. Great place, right? And you see all this cool art, and Monty, you've got a huge part of the wall here, right? I mean, talk a little bit about what your inspiration is. Where do you really like to play in that artistic space? What really drives you?
Well, I've been an illustrator for almost 30 years. And so I started out in comics, self-published my first comic as I was the colorist in 1993 after graduating from good old Colorado State University.
Go Rams.
Go Rams, absolutely. And I didn't have lofty enough goals that I thought I would actually be doing what I'm doing today, like art for Mandalorian and NBC Universal and Magic the Gathering and all these kinds of other things. I just thought I would kind of be an artist, illustrator, I don't know, drawing bulldozers and, things for people's brochures and doing logos. So my degree is in graphic design. But lo and behold, in 1993, my friends and I, we packed up a van like so many would-be comic creators, and we went to this little thing called Comic-Con in San Diego. And a little bit of back info, Comic-Con at the time was only about 30,000 people. And it was kind of hardcore nerds. Like, you didn't go there unless you were a comic collector. There was no such cosplay. There was a few people dressed up or wearing, comic book shirts and things like that. And you're like, oh, cool. Did you see the, guy dressed as Wolverine or whatever? But, there wasn't the throngs of fans. It wasn't mass market, mass media. Marvel and DC movies hadn't made it cool yet. I mean, I guess more so Marvel. I mean, DC had plenty of movies around with, Batman and all that kind of thing. But I think the Marvel movies and the TV shows like Smallville and Arrow, really made pop culture cool, like mainstream. Because if I had asked some kid 10 years ago, who's Tony Stark, right? They'd be like, I don't know who Tony Stark is. But you ask somebody now, who's Tony Stark? Oh, he's Iron Man. That's kind of cool that things that we love is mainstream, and that you can find Star Wars and things like that kind of everywhere. My background is a little more unique in that I grew up on a cattle ranch in Idaho. And so we did things like roping and branding and, branding and we had a hunting and fishing lodge. We were on the Snake River. So people would say, well, this is kind of interesting. This artist has running horses and stagecoaches, but I'm also the artist for the Mandalorian collection. And so I do a painting for every single episode that's licensed through Lucasfilm and Thomas Kincaid Studios, who's the Star Wars licensee. And so it's cool to wear like different hats and things like that. And so I tell people, well, I might be doing one piece of art and I take off my cowboy hat and I put on my space helmet, and it's not a poser thing, because I have the background in it. My oldest brother raises buffalo. And so he has 250 head of bison. We still have cattle. We still have land. We still are in agriculture. But I also have a life-size Han Solo in carbonite in my studio.
That's so.
And I custom painted one of my motorcycles to be like the exterior hull of a ship. So it's kind of like my bike looks like Slave One, because I'm a nerd and, but I'm cool nerd. Like I get to do it for a living.
So you mentioned, you do the Mandalorian art.
Mhm.
Is that the kind of thing where they would, if someone didn't know who you were, or maybe didn't come into the store, would they see some of that, like at the end credits? Is that some of the stuff that you would do, or is it more separate where someone would see it somewhere else in a more retail setting?
Yeah, so mine is all fine art, and in that sense, it's all traditionally painted and drawn. So the pieces that are at the end credits are, my understanding is that they're one of two things. Some of it, I think, is what we call previs art, right? And they're mocking up, this is what the guys are going to look like jumping onto the skiff. But the skiff in the actual show might look different. And you're like, oh, that was concept art. You can tell it was different. And then there's others you can tell that kind of look like screen caps, maybe, or a shot that was created as a storyboard and then it was filmed that way, and you see the Razor Crest ripping down the canyon and that sort of thing. There are a few moments that I've also illustrated that have been, because some of those moments at the end credits, they're just very key moments, and so we've chosen to pick that same moment. I think the difference is all of that art is all digital. And so it's created in, a variety of things, maybe Photoshop or Painter or whatever like that, as opposed to I'm hunched over an art table and I'm using colored pencils and airbrush and oils and acrylics and, this very sort of kitchen sink approach towards creating a 36-inch painting.
So much more of a by hand,
all
as
by
opposed
hand.
to digital.
Yes.
Okay.
You're doing the dirty work.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of the reasons why I got hired. And, I try to inspire young artists today who sometimes have a tendency maybe to go digital very early on. It's convenient. It's easy. They've got an iPad. You've got, iPaint Pro or whatever it is. And you don't have to schlep around pencils and markers and go to the store and, I'm out of black. I can't do anything till I get more of that. So I get the convenience part. But I can tell you one of the reasons why I was chosen for this particular project over some other artists is they said, oh, well, we're getting real paintings. And the history of Thomas Kincaid Studios and all of the art that he had created when he was alive was all traditionally painted. That does not mean that there aren't plenty of opportunities for digital artists. There are, and there are artists doing a lot of Star Wars art. I would say 80-90% or more is all digital. I had the opportunity to work on Star Wars Galaxies, the video game, which was a online trading card game, one of the early kind of card games, if you will, that was digital. And I did 10 paintings for that project, one of which is in the Rancho Obi-Wan Museum. That was the painting that I sold of Princess Leia that was purchased by Steve Sansweet, who runs the Rancho Obi-Wan Museum. And he was like, well, this would be really cool to have one of these pieces. He couldn't buy art from any of the other artists because I was the only one who was painting. Unfortunately, after I did those 10, they said, going forward, you must work digital. You're the only artist who's working traditional. So your art doesn't have the same look. I wanted it to look, for lack of a better word, right? It all needs to be the same. Mm-hmm. And which I find kind of goes against the grain of art. If you look around this wonderful co-op of artists, every artist has their own look and signature style and flair. And you can say, that's Bev, that's Mark, that's Bob, that's Frank, that's Janine. And so that's the thing I like about art. And when they said, you need to look like everyone else, I'm like, this might not be the right project for me. Thank you for the work I've done. But I don't want to be sitting in front of a computer all day. Mm-hmm. I choose not to be that artist. And it doesn't mean I don't have the skills, because I've done work for distilleries and breweries, but I can't tell you what I was just doing, but I just did my first project for NBC Universal.
Oh, nice. Interesting.
And
spoilers.
And the art that I needed to do, which was behind the scenes stuff. It won't be something that's a retail for sale thing. I did the artwork digitally because that's what they needed. That's what they wanted. And it was a 2-day turnaround. Hi, I'm the art director. I need this and I need it by this date. Oh, well, normally I would say no, because you want it in 2 days, but wow, you're NBC Universal. So yes.
We gotta make stuff happen.
Right.
Kind of like the pocketbook.
Right. But you also don't want to, I always tell people, especially when it comes to art skills, if somebody comes to me and they say, I have this thing I want you to do, painting, drawing, whatever. In my head, I want to confidently be able to say yes before I even know what the question is. Can you paint my car? Can you paint me an 80-foot mural? Can you paint on a pool, where there's going to be water? Can you, whatever it is, I want to be able to be like, yep, I can do that. If the project appeals to me and they're paying a fair rate for it. And so I've done all those things. You can see murals at Denver Divers in Cherry Creek and a few restaurants around town. The problem is the restaurants change hands and they paint over your mural.
Yeah.
But I painted maybe between 100 and 200 vehicles, including an airplane. And so,
That's awesome.
You want to be able to say, oh, I have to use a certain kind of paint for that. Enamels, urethanes, things that work outdoor, or in the case of the pool at Denver Divers, it's got to be oil paint, can't be water-based. It's near a dive pool. We even put some fish and things in the pool that they had drained and used the special paint so that when people are doing their dive tests, there's fish in the pool. And it's super crappy, gloopy, heavy paint, but that's what you got to use because that's what can stand up to chlorine and all that kind of thing. So I like kind of doing it all and drawing and painting and all those kinds of things. So digital, I'm not a wizard at it, but I need to because I'm a professional. That's what I do.
One of the big things when we came here the first time, one of the things that Mo told us, and I thought was awesome, was the fact that all of the art that you have over here, I'm looking at the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, which I have a question about that later. It's a really complex question. But the one next to it, which was actually up front the first time I was here, is the one that's from Terminator. And you've got this giant truck frame on the outside with the working lights and everything. And Mo, who's the owner of this place, told us that you build all those frames for every piece. And that's one of the things that I think is just super fascinating about your art is, like you're saying, you love the hands-on stuff, but then you're building the frames and stuff too. But what goes into some of the things that you think about when you're putting, even for these pieces of art?
Well, it was funny. I'm a little embarrassed to admit it, but if you had asked me 5-6 years ago, hey, I'm interested in this piece and I want you to build a frame for it, I probably would have been a little bit of a snot and been like, I'm a painter and an illustrator. I'm not a framer. Like, you do the framing, you decide what you want in your house. Do you think purple's going to look good or you think black's going to look good? But I started doing these much bigger Western pieces, and it would have been not only prohibitively expensive to frame these 4 and 6 foot pieces, but I wouldn't have been able to churn it out. And you would end up having even a lot more money in traditional framing. And so I started doing these really rustic frames that were not particularly high tech in the way they're constructed. They're pretty low tech, but they're very rustic and they're from the vision of the artist. And so I started doing these frames with horseshoes and old horse harness, and I started adding gun racks to them. I would put replica guns on there, or if it was a tombstone frame, it would have a tombstone badge. And, I started doing all these little things that are specific to that piece. So I even have a 3D printer now. So I can print out Wyatt Earp's gun and Doc Holliday's gun and say, oh, this customer wants this here. One of the pieces that Mo sold early on, first week my art was here, and it was to a Denver police officer, and we incorporated his badge into the actual frame. We had his badge number on it, had his name on it. And so I don't know any other artists at the moment that are going to this sort of nth degree level of customization. And so I have a retired neighbor, Tom Kaler, who helps me with a lot of the frames, and he has all these, machinery and wood and all this kind of stuff.
Junk.
Well, no, I mean, he has big band saws, and he has, a couple of bays dedicated to all this stuff, and he has more equipment than I do, and he's very available. And so together, I have somebody to bounce ideas off of, and I might be like, hey, Tom, I have this idea for this Terminator Transformers frame, and I want it to look like a truck, and I want to do lights or whatever. He might start thinking about it. Well, if we had a battery pack, we actually got lights on the top. And I think he was actually the one that suggested the diamond plate. I was going to go more of an aged or rusted metal, and I was like, and we had just put some diamond plate on my show trailer to protect the fenders, and we're like, well, let's just use the leftover diamond plate. And so a lot of it is very leftover pieces, upcycling. Some of it's new things I get from, Amazon, and then other pieces, like a lot of the old horse and Western stuff, is all authentic. So a lot of not only the wood, but a lot of the pieces that go on it, they're all between 100 and 200 years old.
Oh, wow.
So people really like that history
Yeah.
of saying, wow, I think about the horse that wore this shoe or whatever. And some people look at it and go, is that horse manure still in there? Like, yep, I screwed it right to the frame. Like I'm not, it's all part of the history. Because it's not very fancy. The more high tech stuff, like if I do a Star Wars frame or the Terminator Transformers, that stuff's all, you want it to be new and shiny and cool and have lights. And I love doing LEDs in frames because you can do light effects. So I've done a couple of really cool, like Harley Quinn frames that had like the whole frame hung off of her baseball bat, and then it had graffiti on the side. And, I do little sketches sometimes on the actual frame that look like she wrote something, to Joker, and then I'll have little dangles off of it. And, even if I buy the bat, so it's the official bat, I'll like whack it on the ground and, hit it with a drill and, like I muck it up and then I, graffiti it. So I put my own touch on it so that if I spend, 5, 10, 20 hours building a frame that is different than the last one I did. And then I might only offer between 3 and 5, like of those items, and each one is unique. So it's never a production thing.
Just to update everybody, I see a question out there, and we're a little bit in, so we'll just update everyone. We're at this place called You Deserve Art. It is in Southwest Plaza, Littleton, Colorado. The mountains are just behind us. It's a beautiful day outside. It's a little chilly now, but man, it's a gorgeous Colorado day. So
absolutely, yeah. And this is, I got to say, for me as an artist, even though I've had a pretty storied career, this is an absolute great location because this is the first time that in the Denver area, where I've been for 30 years, that people can come and see my art. And when somebody says, hey, I want to do some Christmas shopping, I'm not like, hey, swing by the house. It's, you have things available on the website, but art is one of those things that when people see it in person and they can touch it and see the strokes of the paint, the quality of the print, the uniqueness of the frame, and say, hey, Monty just brought this in, or, Bev just painted this 10 minutes ago. The paint's still wet, and people have the first opportunity to get stuff. So this is a really beautiful location. It's well run, it's well lit, and people can come and experience art that is very affordable and entry level, as opposed to a lot of galleries. Like, say you go into a gallery in Santa Fe, people might walk in and go, oh my God, I can't afford a single thing here.
Yeah.
And so Mo has curated a wonderful selection of mostly Colorado artists. He does have one that's from out of the country who does beautiful wildlife paintings. And I just think it's great to see all the different price points and beginning levels. So I'm a bit jealous that I didn't have this opportunity when I was 16 or 18 years old or 22 or just out of college. I would have been like, oh my God, I'm in a gallery. This is awesome. And it is more of a co-op than a gallery because of just the way that everything's sort of presented here. So I'm proud that my art's here and that it's selling among so many other great Colorado artists that everybody has their own voice. It's unique. Absolutely. And, there's so much handcrafted stuff from welded and sculpted to there's earrings and there's jewelry and there's Star Wars, and it's so cool. It's almost like going to an art Comic-Con, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because you don't know what's around the corner.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's 5 minutes from the house, so.
Right,
No.
but it's kind of
Speak
convenient.
for yourself.
It's about 20. It's about 20 for me, but I'll tell you, it's pretty convenient.
Right.
But we're not going to talk about Tank's Drive.
Right. And to your point, walking around and looking at the place, it's almost tangible, right?
Mhm.
And you said you can see the strokes and the effort put into not just the painting, but you were talking about the frames and how that's almost turning into another medium for you to express
Mhm.
not only what's on the canvas, but the overall vision of the piece.
Yeah, and it gives each piece a unique flavor. So we have a book that I printed up. It's a coffee table book that Mo has here, and it has 250-ish images. And you'll see the same print maybe in there 5 or 10 times because it's in different sizes, and every frame will be unique. And so the cool part is that it makes that piece, even though the print may not be different, is that it's
It is right here.
yeah, and so it makes it so that every print is unique, and a lot of times the customer can have an input into it, and they might say, "Oh, I want that same one," and I'll say, "Well, out of respect for the people who own that one, I'm not going to make you a frame just like that. I might use the same ingredients and create a different recipe."
You guys before there were NFTs, there were paintings.
Those are tangible.
Yeah, so same image for 4 different times, different sizes.
With the same image.
Right.
Yep.
That is actually
And
really
one of the
beautiful.
things that's unique that I do that I don't know any other artist doing currently is I will draw the customer into the art. And so
Wow.
I tell people, well, wouldn't it be interesting? You love that Stagecoach, Drive, or whatever the art is. That's my Western art. And I will say, wouldn't it be even cooler, though, if your grandfather and your father were the ones driving the coach? And maybe your grandfather's not around anymore.
Mhm.
Or what if it's your grandfather and his favorite actor, John Wayne? Right? I could draw John Wayne and them. And then every time you look at that, you're like, you know what? My dad would have enjoyed
Right.
a drive.
Slide that in here.
Slide that.
Yeah, slide that in here so we can
So
see
this
this.
is
This piece.
well, so not original, print. We only use the term original for the actual hand-drawn art. But in this particular piece, the father is driving the coach. His daughter's next to him.
Mhm.
Then the grandfather is in the back smoking a stogie.
Oh yeah.
Oh, there he is.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then it says Grassy Knoll Gang. So that's the name of where their cabin was instead of saying Wells Fargo. And then they did have an actual brand. And so the brand is on the horses.
Oh wow.
That's amazing. Wow.
So
Super
the
personal,
art is
cool.
done traditionally. I draw separate portraits for them that they get to own. And then utilizing the technology, scan that in, and then using Photoshop skills, you manipulate it in a way that it looks like it was always there. And then until the cows come home, they can make their own prints, large and small, right? So say the daughter gets married later on and she has her own house, and hey, could I get one of those prints for her? Small print, large print, whatever. The work part of it is already done. And so
That's
it's
super
kind of
cool.
become this kind of new niche that I've been doing. And you would have to have those particular set of skills to be able to combine both
Well done.
digital and traditional. I know you were taken away by that.
Oh, there it was.
Oh boy.
Ba-dum, boom.
I couldn't resist.
Of course not. How could you not?
I actually had a quick question. When you're doing, so for a lot of, especially the bigger, like Universal, like Disney, like Lucas,
Mhm.
there's a lot of pre-work done on a lot of stuff, for discs and stuff like that. Is that similar to what they do with you? They give you an idea of what they're kind of looking for in a particular episode of, like, hey, we want this kind of a piece. And
Yeah.
they get in touch with you and kind of give you ideas on what to work with. Or,
I would say outside of the Star Wars stuff,
Mhm.
that maybe there would be more specifics on, hey, this is what I need. I need a painting of a chimpanzee riding a motorcycle, and here's the motorcycle, and then here's the city skyline in the background. We need all these things, painted together. The passionate part is with the work for Mandalorian, and I also have some classic Star Wars characters, is it because I'm kind of a Star Wars super nerd, and I know the movies probably better than they do, is they've actually entrusted trusted me to pretty much be the one who submits the ideas. And so I would submit the first round of what we call thumbnail sketches, and those are pretty awful. They're chicken scratchy, and like, oh, Mando's over here, and he walks in the room and he's doing this. Oh, bad guy over here, or whatever. Because you don't spend a ton of time on them, because if I have say a Zoom call with the licensee people and things like that, then we sit down and look at those on the screen, and then we compare notes on what we think is going to be successful with the fans, right? I'm not painting for me. I'm painting for people who are like me. I come at it from the point of view of what do other people, and myself included, what would we want to put on our wall, right? And so I might look at a certain episode and say, okay, I thought this was a particularly captivating, type moment, right? So maybe it's episode 2 or 3, which was in Mando, which was the one with like the frog lady.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Probably not going to be pitching, him eating eggs, like that's like kind of became like a thing on the internet. But and seeing the Razor Crest drop through the clouds, suddenly there's this icy planet, and he's ripping through the canyons, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm reminded of Empire Strikes Back because of right? Like, since we've had, icy planet stuff. Right. And my favorite ship in growing up, one of my favorite ships was the Snowspeeder. And to this day, I still own my action, ship. It's still on a shelf in my studio, of the Snowspeeder. Because even though I gave some stuff away to nieces and nephews and things like that, I'm like, yeah, I'm not giving that away.
Some of that old Kenner stuff is
yes, right. Yeah, and it was all well played with. I was not keep it in the box bag kind of a thing. They were all destroyed. You don't want to mess up your stuff. I had enough respect for it, but yeah.
Does it still have the harpoon cable? They used to have the one.
I don't think it has a string on it.
Yeah,
but the
gun's
string
still
on
there.
It.
Okay, good.
Yeah, I never broke anything off my stuff, but I would mix and match, and I didn't figure out till years later when somebody was like, you're using the wrong figure in there. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, this is the Snowspeeder driver, and they're like, yeah, there wasn't those were just rebels in their stuff. That's an AT-AT driver. And I'm like, looking at him going, yeah, but look at him, he's badass. He has a white helmet, all this sort of stuff. So for years,
big long gator.
Yeah. No, those were the snow troopers had the white plastic one. But for some reason, I just thought that the AT-AT driver, like helmet guy, so that's who I always put in my ship. So apparently I was going against canon.
Oh, no. that never happens.
Right.
Nobody's ever done that.
Right.
Yeah. So then once we would decide on an idea, like, hey, we think this is going to be what we look like. So an interesting one that we have available here, I believe, is episode, I want to say 5, maybe it's 3. It blends together a little bit. Anyway, the piece is called Reckoning, and it's and Mando comes back into town on the dewback, and he's got to go save Grogu. And I had pitched a couple of ideas for that particular episode because we got some speeders and things like that, but we might want to do those in later episodes. But this dewback, writing is like really cool. Star Wars together. The one where he's on the dewback.
The lizard thing.
The big lizard thing. So one of my initial sketches was in the actual episode, he rides into town and you see him from behind, right? And there's lights on in the street and stuff like that. But you don't see very much of the town.
That's so cool.
And so, so here's the piece. And what I proposed to them was, hey, this is really cool. This is like the gunfighter returning to town. There's going to be a showdown. He's got somebody to rescue, and I get it done. But they're like, yeah, but it's kind of boring because we're seeing him from the back, right? This is like a butt view of a dewback. And so I said, okay, well, could we illustrate it from the front? Well, there was no reference material. They wasn't like, hey, paint this screen grab, so this was a ton of work. And I actually did even buy a couple of 1990s dewback Kenner toys
Oh wow.
that had this the Sand Trooper on it.
Mm-hmm.
I still have it in the studio because I kind of wanted to look at a different reference. I'm like, oh, these guys actually have kind of like sharp teeth and things like that. Because otherwise, if you're only referencing what you can dig up on the internet, you're looking at everybody at work.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm actually like taking photo phone. I'm holding the back at different angles, going, all right, how much of this jaw could I see, and how much is this going to block Mando too much if the camera angle is too low? And then you've got to figure in there's still room for the town and the lights coming out, because you want this, stranger in town kind of feeling, right? Because he's still this mysterious bounty hunter. And so as an artist, you'll have to be able to do that, as opposed to people saying, oh yeah, well, it's nifty, you just click a screen grab and add a filter to it and we'll just call it art. That a lot.
Right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
I mean, you cover Magic the Gathering as well. So one of the pieces that we looked at before is got a bunch of, it's got the Italian card and all the original artwork that it comes with. How long have you been doing that for? Is that something that you just started doing, or is that something you've been going back a while? And do you play Magic the Gathering?
So I started playing Dungeons and Dragons
Okay.
in 78, I think 78, 79. I still have my original character sheet. So I am an old gaming nerd. And like I said, some of my books are held together with like a light. and early artwork as a youngster too. I enjoy painting the lead figures. We called them lead figures. They probably weren't lead. They were probably pewter. And I still have some in a tackle box somewhere. So longtime game player, and we played every role-playing game that got on the pike in the early to mid 80s. And so we played. There was games for Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Car Wars, Villains and Vigilantes, Champions. There was a Top Secret. There was a James Bond game.
I played one.
Yeah, that was a harder game.
It was.
I was like, oh god, the rules need to be simplified in this. So we a big RPG player, and so in 1998, very full circle nerdy moment for me. I had done my first work, Wizards of the Coast, and it was a novel cover for, it was called Star. I think the series of novels was maybe called Star Drive. Anyway, so I turned in that painting, and the art director was like, very timely, very professional, easy to work with. All right, let's give you some more work. And then that led to, the art directors at Wizards of the Coast would talk to each other and be like, hey, I got a guy for you. And so my timing was really that time, because lo and behold, 3rd edition Dungeons and Dragons was being worked on in the background. Nobody else knew it was coming out. And they're like, hey, would you like to work on Dungeons and Dragons? I'm like, oh my God. My nerddom just, nerdgasm. And so I get my assignment. I'm getting to the magic part because it's around it.
You're good.
And so here, this was the assignments would come in by fax. Right, because the internet was around, but it wasn't useful. Like, you could hardly send anything,
Right.
Other than emails. And so I get the assignment for the monster manual, and some of the designs were already sketched out by staff guys and gals. I think it was all guys at the time. And you got to do you were painting yourself. Hey, are you okay working with other artists? And you do the painting, and they already sketch it. I'm like, yeah, of course. Collaboration is a huge part of art, especially in comics and things like that. And so I got to paint the troll, the orc,
Oh wow.
the
That's
wyvern, the mimic, digester. There were some that were lesser known, but I was like, oh my gosh, I'm painting the orc and the troll. Like, these are like, that's the first thing you practically encounter. Like, and there's a kobold or there's an orc. And so I believe the guy who was the staff guy who did some of those designs, his name was Sam Wood, did a fantastic job. And so I could do the paintings for this day. If there's any game players out there, and it says Monty Michael Moore in the credits, and you can look through and you'll see some of the illustrations, and you'll see like an M with another smaller M underneath it. So rather than a big bold signature, since I was just doing the painting part, I would kind of hide like the MM like in there kind of with it. And so that went really well. Super excited. Got to do more. I got to do art for Forgotten Realms, Dragon Magazine right before it went out of biz, right, because here digital age,
Right.
and that's changed the whole gaming landscape since then, which is the reason why I kind of don't do gaming art anymore.
Yeah.
The art director for Magic the Gathering was like, hey, met you, like your work, very cool, assignment for Magic. And so I was in 3 different sets, which was Onslaught, Odyssey, and Classic Edition. So the painting that I just did this week over there is called Mist Form Mask. And it's an oil painting and concept art sketches down below. And then I recently went and got 2 cards. So the framing of all of that is new and hasn't been shown or offered very much because I actually sold the painting like 18 years ago at Star Wars Celebration 2. I think 2 or 3. Might have been 3. Collector bought almost everything I had. Well, he recently reached out to me and said, hey, I'm not collecting anymore. Collectors go through phases. Hey, I've had this. Do you want to buy it back? And so sometimes I will buy the artwork back so that I'm the one to find its new home. It's not always a monetary decision because you might be selling it for similar to just what the market value is of that. There are Magic the Gathering paintings that have sold for hundreds of thousands, let alone tens of thousands. But it has more to do with the rarity, how early it was painted, and what the card is. Because there are paintings that most artists would say that's not particularly well painted or crafted as an illustration. But if it's the Black Lotus and somebody's willing to pay you $500,000 for it, it was part of their childhood, that's what they're going to pay you for it.
Sure.
Right. It's the difference between, what Steven Spielberg's first film Duel looked like when he first started, right? And what he might create now as a new movie, right? There's just an evolution of the art. Mm-hmm. And so when I came back from Comic-Con and I had 3 of these paintings and Mo and I were discussing, he's like, I would love to have one of those to be able to show. And, it's just so much better for people to be able to get to see things like this as opposed to sitting in my storage or garage waiting for the next show.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's all